The moment Emily stepped into the gun shop, a clerk burst out laughing. "Lost, ma'am. The bakery's next door." Another customer sneered. "With arms like those, you're trying a rifle. Careful not to chip a nail." Emily didn't answer. She simply said, "One name, M82X Phantom Mod." A tactical rifle that had never been listed for public sale. As she listed its precise specs down to the millimeter, the entire shop fell dead silent. Emily stood there, her gray canvas backpack pulling her shoulders slightly forward. Her brown hair hung loose, a little tangled from the wind outside. She wore a faded windbreaker, creased at the elbows, and jeans that looked like they'd seen better days. Her sneakers were scuffed, the laces frayed at the ends. To everyone in that room, she looked like she'd wandered in by mistake, like someone who didn't belong in a place like this, a high-end gun store, where the walls gleamed with polished rifles, and the air smelled of metal and oil, the kind of place where serious money and serious egos came to play. But Emily didn't flinch. She didn't shift her weight or look away. She just stood there, her gray eyes steady, waiting for the clerk to catch up. The clerk, a guy in his 30s with a buzz cut and a smirk that seemed permanent, leaned over the counter. "Sweetheart, you sure you're in the right place? Coffee shop's next door." His voice carried, and a couple of guys in tactical vests near the display case chuckled. One of them, a tall man with dark sunglasses perched on his head, gave a low whistle. "What you applying to clean the rifles, babe?" The room felt smaller now, the air thick with their amusement. Emily didn't react. She adjusted her backpack, just enough to ease the weight, and repeated herself. M82X, Phantom Mod, 0.4, sight alignment, offset 0, 416 barrel diameter, LR9 style muzzle brake. Her voice was calm, like she was reading off a grocery list. The clerk's smirk faltered. A woman in a sleek blazer, her nails painted a glossy red, stepped forward from the crowd, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was the kind of person who carried herself like she owned every room she walked into, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Honey, you're adorable, but this isn't a toy store," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Maybe try something lighter like a BB gun." A few people snickered, egged on by her confidence. Emily's fingers tightened briefly on her backpack strap, the only sign she'd heard. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes locking onto the woman's. "I'm here for sniper models," she said, her tone even almost gentle. The woman's smile froze, and she took a half step back, her heels catching slightly on the floor. The room waited, but Emily said nothing more, letting the silence do the rest. An older man, with a white beard, leaning against a rack of scopes, turned his head sharply. He'd been quiet until now, sipping coffee from a paper cup, but his eyes narrowed. "You know that rifle?" he asked, his voice gruff, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes. Emily nodded just once. "I once used it from the rooftop of a 19-story building. Pierced a 5mm glass pane, hit a moving target." The words hung there simple and unadorned. No one laughed this time. The guy in sunglasses tilted his head like he was trying to figure out if she was joking. The clerk blinked, then coughed, trying to regain his footing. "Right. Well, we don't have that model here. Nobody does. You sure you're not thinking of something else?" A burly man in a flannel shirt, his hands calloused from years of manual work, snorted from the corner of the shop. He was flipping through a catalog, but stopped to point at Emily's worn sneakers. "Look at those shoes," he said, his voice booming with mockery. "You think you're handling a sniper rifle with those? You'd trip before you even got to the range." The crowd tittered some, nodding along their eyes, flicking to her feet. Emily didn't look down. She slid her backpack off one shoulder, set it gently on the floor, and straightened up. "I've walked farther than you'd think in these," she said, her voice soft, but clear, like a blade slipping through fabric. The man's grin faded, his catalog slipping slightly in his hands. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his bravado crumbling under her steady gaze. The clerk came back with a beast of a rifle, a Barrett M17, and slammed it on the counter like he was trying to make a point. "Here, try holding it. Just don't drop it." The thing weighed close to 30 pounds, and everyone in the room knew it. The guy in sunglasses crossed his arms, leaning back like he was waiting for a show. "You sure you can even hold that, princess? It weighs more than your purse." A few others snickered, their voices sharp and mean. Emily didn't look at them. She stepped forward, her sneakers scuffing softly on the polished floor, and picked up the rifle with one hand, no shake, no strain. She rotated the barrel, her fingers moving over it, like she'd done it 1,000 times. The room went still again. A younger guy, maybe mid-20s, with a flashy watch and a loud laugh, leaned over to his friend, not bothering to lower his voice. "Bet she learned that from YouTube tutorials," he said, his grin wide and mocking. "What's next?" "She's going to tell us she's a Navy SEAL." His friend laughed, and the sound echoed off the walls. Emily set the rifle down, her movement slow, deliberate. She glanced at the guy just for a second and asked, "You ever fire one of these under wind shear?" The question was soft, but it hit like a dart. The guy's laugh caught in his throat, and he shifted suddenly, unsure. His friend nudged him, but he didn't answer. Emily turned back to the rifle, her hand steady, like she hadn't just silenced him without trying. The clerk's face tightened. He snatched the rifle back, his voice clipped. "Impressive. Now take it apart, or put it down." It was a challenge, and everyone knew it. A couple of guys near the door shifted closer, watching. Emily didn't hesitate. She set the rifle back on the counter, her movement smooth and deliberate. In 7 seconds, someone was counting. She had it in 8 pieces, laid out like a puzzle she'd solved in her sleep. She didn't look up, didn't check for reactions. She just started putting it back together, her hands moving with a quiet rhythm. Click, snap, slide. Done. The clerk's jaw twitched. He didn't say anything. Then she reached into her backpack, pulling out a tiny screwdriver, the kind you'd use to fix glasses. She leaned over the reassembled rifle, found a narrow crevice near the trigger guard, and made a small adjustment. "This catches off by 0.3 mm, she said, her voice still even. "At long range, that throws shots off by 6 centimeters. The older man with the beard stepped closer, his coffee forgotten. He took the rifle, checked the catch himself, and froze. "She's right," he said almost to himself. "I've used this thing for 2 years and never noticed." A younger guy, a hunter in a camo cap, whispered to the person next to him, "What unit did she serve in?" Emily's only response was, "I'm retired." It wasn't an answer, but it shut the question down. A woman with a tight ponytail and a tactical vest, her arms crossed like she was judging a competition, spoke up from the back. "Cute trick," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "But anyone can memorize specs and take apart a gun. Doesn't mean you're not just some wannabe playing soldier." The crowd murmured, some nodding along. Emily paused, her hands resting on the counter. She didn't turn to face the woman, but her fingers tapped once slightly against the metal. "You think I'm playing?" she asked, her voice low, almost curious. The woman opened her mouth, then closed it, her confidence wavering under Emily's steady gaze. The room felt colder, like the air had been sucked out. The guy in sunglasses wasn't done, though. He pushed off the wall, his voice loud enough to carry. "Big talk. Let's see you shoot then." The others nodded, their smirks creeping back. The clerk gestured toward a door at the back of the shop. "Range is out there. Let's see what you've got." They led her outside to a dusty range with targets set up at varying distances. The farthest one was a quarter-sized coin, dangling from a string at 200 meters. "No one's hit that in 3 years." The clerk said, his tone dripping with mockery. A small crowd followed, their boots crunching on the gravel. They were waiting for her to fail. As Emily stepped onto the range, a man in a leather jacket, his face weathered and his voice gruff, called out, "Hope you brought your lucky charm, kid. You're going to need it." The crowd laughed, but it was nervous now, less certain. Emily didn't respond. She knelt to adjust her shoelace, her movement slow, almost meditative. The wind picked up stirring dust around her feet. She stood, pulled on her gloves, and took the rifle from the clerk. As she checked the scope, her fingers brushed against a small scratch on the stock, a mark that wasn't supposed to be there. She paused, just for a moment, her eyes narrowing. Nobody else noticed, but that scratch meant something to her, something from a long time ago. Emily didn't rush. She pulled on a pair of worn gloves from her bag, the leather cracked but soft, like they'd been with her for years. She took the rifle, checked the scope, and settled into position. 2 seconds to line up the shot. The first shot rang out, and the coin spun, glinting in the sunlight. A murmur went through the crowd. She adjusted slightly, her fingers barely moving. Second shot, the coin's edge cracked, a tiny piece breaking off. The murmur stopped. Third shot, the coin split clean in two, the pieces fluttering to the ground like dry leaves. Nobody spoke. The clerk's face was blank, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The guy in sunglasses looked away, suddenly interested in his boots. A middle-aged woman with a clipboard who'd been lingering near the range's edge taking notes dropped her pen. She scrambled to pick it up. Her cheeks flushed, but her eyes stayed on Emily. She was a firearms instructor known for her tough critiques, and she'd been skeptical from the start. "Beginner's luck." She called out, her voice loud but unsteady. "Anyone can get a fluke shot once." The crowd shifted, some nodding, clinging to her words like a lifeline. Emily didn't turn. She set the rifle down, her hands steady, and pulled a small cloth from her bag to wipe her gloves. "Luck doesn't split a coin at 200 meters." She said, her voice quiet but firm, like she was stating a fact about the weather. The instructor froze, her clipboard clutched tight, and the crowd's murmurs died out completely. A teenage boy, probably dragged along by his dad, had been filming the whole thing on his phone. He lowered it now, his eyes wide, his voice barely a whisper. "Did you see that?" he said to no one in particular. His dad, a burly guy with a hunting cap, grabbed the phone and replayed the video, his jaw tight. "Who the hell is she?" he muttered. Emily didn't hear him. She was already packing up, her movements precise. Her backpack slung over one shoulder. The boy kept staring like he'd just seen a superhero walk by. His dad didn't say anything else, but his hands were shaking as he handed the phone back. As Emily packed up, her sleeve slipped, revealing a faded tattoo on her wrist, V17, with a snake curling around a target. The store manager, a stocky man with a buzz cut and a clipboard, had been watching from the edge of the range. His face went pale. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You're Ghost Viper 17. Emily didn't look at him. She zipped her bag, her movement slow and deliberate. A customer nearby, an older guy with a military buzz and a faded jacket, snapped to attention, his hand rising in a crisp salute. Another man, thin and nervous, stepped forward, his voice shaking. "You protected me during Operation Mo." Emily paused just for a second, then said, I didn't protect anyone. I just aimed and shot." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. An older woman in a quilted jacket standing at the back of the crowd clutched her purse tightly. She'd been silent the whole time, her eyes darting between Emily and the others. Now she stepped forward, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You're telling me you're some kind of war hero, with that outfit?" Her words were meant to sting, to rally the crowd back to their earlier mockery. A few people nodded, their smirks returning. Emily didn't flinch. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and turned slightly, her eyes meeting the woman's. "Heroes don't need costumes," she said, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper. The woman's purse slipped from her grip, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Nobody laughed. The crowd's energy shifted like a tide pulling back. The clerk who'd mocked her earlier wasn't done. He stepped up, his arms crossed, his voice sharp. "Nice show, ma'am, but no CL permit, no range use. Rules are rules." Emily didn't argue. She reached into her wallet and pulled out a worn ID. No barcode, no serial, just a plain card with her name and a faded emblem. The clerk took one look and laughed loud and mean. "What is this, a parking pass?" The guy in sunglasses joined in, his voice cutting. "You're still just a civilian wannabe, sweetheart." The manager glanced at the ID, then shook his head. "Not valid. Please leave the range area." Emily nodded, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and walked out. No protest, no glance back. As she stepped into the parking lot, a woman in a designer coat, her phone pressed to her ear, blocked Emily's path. "Excuse me, this isn't a homeless shelter," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You're making the place look bad." The crowd shifted, some looking away, others smirking. Emily stopped, her bag still on her shoulder. She looked at the woman, her gray eyes unblinking. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice soft but firm. The woman scoffed, but her hand tightened on her phone, and she stepped aside, her confidence cracking. Emily walked past, her sneakers quiet on the pavement, leaving the woman standing there, her call forgotten. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Emily stood by the curb, her breath visible in the chilly air. A black SUV rolled up its tires, crunching on the gravel. A man in a dark suit stepped out, his face unreadable. He scanned the crowd that had followed her out, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. His eyes locked onto Emily. Without a word, he raised his hand in a formal salute, his posture rigid. "Commander Parker," he said, his voice low but clear. "Your reactivation orders are ready." The crowd froze. The clerk's face went slack. The guy in sunglasses took a step back, his hands suddenly fidgeting. The manager's clipboard slipped from his fingers, hitting the ground with a soft thud. A young woman in the crowd, her arms full of shopping bags, had been watching silently. She dropped one of her bags, a bottle of water, rolling across the gravel. Her eyes were wide, her voice barely audible. "That's Commander Parker," she whispered to her friend, who just nodded, too stunned to speak. The young woman fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling as she started typing, her thumbs moving fast. By nightfall, her post about Emily was trending, a blurry photo of the salute attached. "She was right in front of us," the post read, "and we didn't even know." The comments piled up, thousands of them from people who'd never met her but felt her story. Emily didn't react. She adjusted her backpack, her movements as calm as ever, and walked toward the SUV. The crowd parted, their eyes following her. Nobody spoke. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. The man in the suit opened the door for her, his posture still formal. She climbed in her sneakers, scuffing softly against the running board. The door closed, and the SUV pulled away, leaving a faint cloud of dust in its wake. Inside the shop, the silence lingered heavy and uncomfortable. A man in a worn denim jacket, who'd been hanging back by the shop's entrance, watched the SUV disappear. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, but his fingers fidgeted, betraying his nerves. He'd been a regular at the shop for years, always boasting about his marksmanship. Now he stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the spot where Emily had stood. He'd laughed earlier, joined in with the others, but now his throat felt tight. He turned to the person next to him, his voice low. "I served 20 years and never saw a shot like that," he said almost to himself. Nobody responded. The weight of his words settled over the crowd, making them shift uncomfortably, their earlier bravado gone. The clerk who'd laughed at her, the one with the buzz cut, stood there, his hands still in his pockets. Later that day, his manager called him into the office. "You're done." The manager said, his voice flat. "You don't mock someone like that and keep your job." The clerk tried to argue, but the manager cut him off. "She was Ghost Viper 17. You think you get to laugh at that?" By the next morning, the clerk was cleaning out his locker, his face red, his hands shaking as he stuffed his things into a duffel bag. The guy in sunglasses, the one who'd called her babe, didn't fare much better. Someone in the crowd had recorded the whole thing, every sneer, every laugh, and posted it online. The video spread, and by the end of the week, his hunting club had dropped him. "We don't need that kind of attitude," the club president said in an email that went out to all members. The guy's name was all over the comments, his face tagged in posts that called him out for his smugness. He stopped showing up at the shop, his sunglasses no longer perched on his head. The woman in the blazer, the one with the glossy nails, saw the video too. She laughed it off at first, but when her name started showing up in the comments, her smile faded. Her company, a high-end outdoor gear brand, dropped her as their ambassador. "We can't align with that behavior, Ben," the PR email read. She tried to post a defense online, but it only made things worse. Her followers dwindled and her glossy nails didn't seem to matter anymore. She stopped coming to the shop, her heels no longer clicking on the floor. The manager, the one who dismissed her ID, got a call from a higher-up the next day. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was enough to make him sweat. The store's reputation took a hit. People on forums were talking about how they had treated Emily, how they had laughed at a ghost viper. A few big clients pulled their orders, saying they didn't trust a place that couldn't recognize real skill when it walked through the door. The manager kept his job, but he was quieter after that, his clipboard always tucked under his arm like a shield. The older man with the white beard, the one who'd asked her name, went home that night and pulled out an old photo from a box in his closet. It was him, younger, standing next to a sniper rifle in a desert somewhere. He stared at it for a long time, his fingers tracing the edge. He'd known someone like Emily once, someone who didn't talk much, but carried a weight you couldn't see. He posted about her on a veterans forum, not using her name, just describing what he'd seen. "She's the real deal, Hira," he wrote, and we were too damn blind to see it. The teenage boy who'd filmed her kept the video on his phone, watching it over and over. He showed it to his mom, who teared up when she saw Emily's shot split the coin. "That's what strength looks like," she told him, her voice quiet. The boy nodded, his eyes still on the screen. He didn't know Emily's story, but he felt it like a weight in his chest. He uploaded the video to his own account with a caption that just said, "Respect." It got thousands of views, and he read every comment feeling proud, for reasons he couldn't quite explain. Emily didn't know about any of this. She was already gone, the SUV taking her to wherever her reactivation orders led. She didn't look back at the shop, didn't check her phone for the videos or the posts. She didn't need to. Her life had always been about moving forward one step at a time, no matter what anyone said. Back in the shop, the air still felt heavy, like the weight of her presence hadn't fully left. The customers who'd stayed behind didn't talk much. They just stood there staring at the spot where she'd been. The nervous man who'd mentioned Operation Mo went back to his car and sat there for a while, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He hadn't seen her in years, but he remembered that night, gunfire chaos, and a single shot that had saved his team. He hadn't known her name back then, just the call sign, Ghost Viper 17. He drove home, his mind replaying her shot at the range the way the coin had split in two. He didn't tell anyone what he'd seen. Some things you just carry. The hunter in the camo cap, the one who'd whispered about her unit, went online that night and searched for Ghost Viper. He didn't find much, just rumors, old forum posts about a unit that didn't officially exist. But he found one thread buried deep where someone had written about a sniper who could hit a moving target through glass, from 19 stories up. He bookmarked it, then closed his laptop. He didn't go back to the shop for a while. It didn't feel the same anymore. The woman with the tight ponytail, the one who'd called Emily a wannabe, stood by the range after Emily left, her arms still crossed. She didn't join the crowd outside, didn't follow to see the SUV. Instead, she went back to the shop and bought a scope, her hands shaking as she handed over her card. She'd been so sure of herself, so quick to judge. Now she couldn't stop thinking about Emily's question. "You think I'm playing?" It echoed in her head, making her feel small. She didn't tell anyone about it, but she stopped wearing her tactical vest after that day. Emily's backpack, the one she'd carried into the shop, had a small patch sewn into the inside, hidden from view. It was a faded emblem, the same one on her ID, the one nobody had recognized. She'd sewn it there herself, years ago, after her last mission. It wasn't for anyone else to see, just a reminder, something to carry with her. She didn't talk about her past, didn't wear it like a badge. But it was there, in the way she moved, the way she held a rifle, the way she looked at someone who thought they could break her. The store stayed quiet for days after she left. Customers came and went, but the energy was different. People spoke in lower voices, glanced at the counter where she'd stood. The clerk who'd replaced the one who got fired was careful not to joke too much. The manager stopped carrying his clipboard everywhere. The guy with the white beard came back, once ordered a scope and left without saying much. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough. Somewhere miles away, Emily sat in the back of the SUV, her bag on the seat next to her. The man in the suit didn't talk much, just handed her a folder with a few papers inside. She didn't open it right away. She looked out the window instead, watching the world blur by trees, billboards, a gas station with a flickering sign. Her fingers brushed the edge of her tattoo just for a second, then let go. She didn't need to look at it. She knew what it meant. Emily's story, a woman dismissed as out of place in a high-end gun shop, delivers a powerful life lesson. Never underestimate the strength hidden beneath a quiet exterior. Mocked for her faded windbreaker, scuffed sneakers, and unassuming presence, Emily faced a barrage of sneers, called lost, a wannabe told to stick to coffee shops or bakeries. Yet her precise knowledge of the elusive M82X Phantom mod and her jaw-dropping precision in splitting a coin at 200 meters revealed her as Ghost Viper 17, a legendary sniper whose silent competence spoke louder than the crowd's taunts. This stirs a deep emotion, a pang of recognition for those moments we've been judged or dismissed based on appearances only to prove our worth in ways others couldn't imagine. Emily's calm resilience, her ability to dismantle a rifle in seconds, adjust a trigger guard with a tiny screwdriver, and hit impossible shots, shows that true strength doesn't need to shout. It proves itself in action. Her story reminds us to look beyond surface impressions, to pause before judging, because the person we overlook might carry a history of courage and skill we'll never fully grasp. The crowd's laughter turned to stunned silence, their smugness unraveling into regret, as they faced the consequences, lost jobs, reputations, and opportunities. Emily, unfazed, walked away with her truth intact, leaving a lesson etched in their minds. Respect isn't owed by titles or flash, but earned through quiet grit. Have you ever been misjudged or seen someone rise above unfair criticism? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear how you've faced judgment and kept going. If Emily's journey moved, you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories of resilience and redemption. Let's honor the quiet heroes among us, together.